Welcome, everyone. I'm so excited. This is Lindsay Martin Bilbrey with the Event Icons, and we're ready to talk today with Tom Pasha and a little bit about hotel contract negotiations and then what to do once you've got that room block and how to manage it to get the most out of it. We'll be back in just a second.
It's Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern, so you know what that means. It's time for another episode of Event Icons.
Presented by Endless Events.
The show where you get to ask the icons of the events industry anything.
Just go to www.event-icons.com to ask questions.
Our iconic guests will answer them live during the entire show. Before we get started, the more people we have watching, the better the conversation. So please help share Event Icons
on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Just tell your friends to watch at www.event-icons.com.
Now, without any further delay, this is Event Icons.
Welcome again, everyone. This week is really one of my favorites. I love this nitty-gritty part of it because there's so much pressure, I think, on the event professionals out there to find not only the right destination and the right venue to host this amazing event, no matter what kind of event you're hosting, whether it's a meeting, an exhibition, an incentive, a board meeting. There's so many options available to you, but there's also a lot of nuances coming into it now from, the contracting and negotiations. What can and can I put into the contract? What will the hotel be putting in against that? And then once I've got it, how do I make sure that I'm getting what I paid for and making sure that my attendees are happy, which is why we've called in the big guns. Tom Pasha has presented several webinars for me, and it was funny the first time we sent him out, we found him on Connect because he was just doing great content. Angie Aarons was like, this guy's got it. And sure enough, 700 people showed up for my next webinar, broke a record for the company we were working with. And every time he does it, it's always quality content. So I wanted to sit down and have him chat with us a little bit about hotel contract negotiation, procurement, and managing that room block. So Tom, tell us a little bit about yourself and what got you into the business.
Well, that's great. Well, thanks for having me. And yeah, basically I started off here in Orlando. I'm from Orlando. I'm a BD before Disney. And I started here in town as a busboy, a waiter, and a bartender, and a cook. I worked for Hyatt hotels, I have 12 Hyatts over 20 years, all over the country. And then I started my own company about actually 20 years ago now. And what we do, we're a third-party meeting planner. We go on site to manage events as well. So it's been a good run so far.
So far, I love it. So if you weren't doing meetings in hospitality, what would you be doing?
Either professional water skier, which at one point was my big goal. I was going to be a slalom water skier. Actually, one of my many jobs, I drove the water ski boat at Walt Disney World when I was a kid. And I had Peter Pan and Captain Hook behind my boat sword fighting. And I just thought that'd be a great job. So,
do you have pictures?
Luckily, I got no hotel business.
It's funny, like when we had Glenn Thayer on a few weeks back, he was telling us that, his first job was helping run the puppets at a puppet museum for like this mountainside thing. I find you find the most interesting things about people. You're like, if I wasn't doing this, this is what I'd be doing. So, yeah. Well, let's jump right in. So we were talking a little bit before we went on air about site inspections. So let's just start at the very beginning. We found the destination. If you listened to Event Icons and you were checking us out this summer, Rutger Horn from Ovation DMC shared a lot of tips and tricks on how to work with the DMC, the CVBs, and your partners to do the actual destination selection. And then once you get on site, there's some really crucial things in that site inspection. And everybody's site inspection list is a little bit different. So, Tom, what's on your site inspection list that you think people should be using?
Yeah, there's a couple of things actually, and what you may want to do, anyone on the call, be sure to look up tompasha.com. There are some free downloads. There's actually a 14-page free download on how to do a site inspection. And it's got all sorts of information on that. Just it's all free. Whatever you'd like to do, feel free to steal as needed. Okay. So basically what I do, I think about Murphy's Law, is that the one person that's going to have the biggest problem will have the problem during the meeting. So I do my best to avoid that problem. So what I do, I hit the hotel on a site inspection basis on being very thorough, very professional. The food's got to be great. The room's got to be great. Everything's got to be clean. Everything's got to be on time. And if I'm getting all that, I know my Murphy's Law person will be happy. So a couple of things. I always like, for example, when we do the sleeping rooms, I always try to avoid getting the showroom. A lot of times the hotel sales manager would take me up to the showroom, and it's got the lights on and the flowers in the vase and the candy jar and everything else all set up. That may not look anything like the normal guest room. So what I want to do is I'll actually look behind the housekeeper. When he or she gets done with the room, I'll ask to come in and see that room.
Yeah.
And a lot of times the housekeeper will let me in there. So I want to see as it looks from the housekeeping standpoint. The other thing is, having come up in hotels and as a housekeeper, what I'll do the very tight cleanliness inspection. I will go into the bathroom and I'll close the door, sit on the john, and look around. And when you look around, you'll see the dust bunny under the sink, or you'll see sometimes a nightie hanging on the back hook where the housekeeper may have overlooked it. You have to make sure the room is perfectly clean. I'll look under the bed. I'll look up on the cabinets. I'll even run my hand on the top of the window frames just to make sure there's no dust on there. Okay, that's real important. The other thing is, when they go to lunch, I try not to go to the restaurant, order something off the menu. I'll ask the sales manager to send one cover for whatever banquet's being plated up that day. I know the restaurant's going to be good, but I want to see the banquet cover come out. I want to see them pull the cover off, and I want to see it. Is it hot? Does it look good? Has it been there? Is it in a hot box for too long? I want to see it because that's going to be very important to the group.
Yeah, I do that too. I actually, I try to book when they have a meeting in house, not one where like they're running around with, roosters with their heads cut off, but I want to sit in the back and I want to be served as an attendee, because even when they're inside the restaurant, there are ways that they can make the experience slightly better than if you're sitting at a round watching the magic happen. Like, are they filling up glasses on time? Is the flow coming through? Are they taking someone's plate away? If I have something and I'm like, oh, but I'm gluten free, just those little things that from an experiential perspective, you really don't think about, because your expectation as an event planner, they're going to make sure that you're as happy as you can be. The attendees, they say that they will, but everybody gets busy. And so it's tough.
Yeah, the other thing I like to do, and you can ask about this, is that when you're walking around and see the restaurant, the bar, and all the usual things, see if they'll let you walk around in the back of the house. And walk around in the back of the house. And if it's clean and clear and quiet and everything is moving correctly, a certain amount of working clutter is okay, but the back of the house is the soul of the house. So whatever you see back there, that's how the operation is being worked. So if the back of the house is dirty or loud or a problem, you may want to look at another hotel. You look at some of the...
Oh, I'm sorry.
I was just saying, one of my favorites, I've done the back of the house here at the Gaylord here in Orlando. It's gorgeous. It looks like a showroom. It's absolutely beautiful. I've done the Marriott World Center here. I've done the Marriott New Orleans, and I ask specifically go in the back of the house, because I know that if the back of the house looks good, my group will be treated correctly.
So do you like to ask them how long the staff has been on staff? Like the Four Seasons, that's a huge selling point of theirs, because once you work for the Four Seasons, many people don't leave. And the same thing with Hyatt, because the mentorship program and the way that they pull people up to get them to the management track, oftentimes you'll find somebody who's been there 20, 30 years, second or third generation. So is that a good sign, do you think? Or do you think that it's something where sometimes it can have a negative effect on a property?
I think it's good. I think it's good to see not necessarily the entire group staying there the entire time, but typically I always consider it the 80-20 rule. 20%, this core number of employees, they've been there. A lot of the hotels I opened 25 and 30 years ago, a lot of them are still there. But again, 75 to 80%, the managers and the employees, we do move people around a lot in Hyatt, just because we're always opening hotels.
Right. So let's get in and think. So you found the property, right? The site inspection, you've narrowed it down. And so now they're like, okay, well, we've got this contract for you to take a look at. This is what per night the rooms are going to cost us. What should I be looking for as I'm kind of combing through the contract? What are my red flags and what are my, ooh, yes, that's exactly what I needed and where I can change things up?
Sure. A couple of things. I always think that negotiations and contracts all start with a good RFP. So again, take a look at your RFP. What I typically recommend is to do very specific. Here's the day-by-day block and the day-by-day rate. Here's day-by-day categories for each of the rooms I need. I want rates for each of those categories. And then I want a bullet point list of the concessions I need for this group. Because what happens, it used to be in the old days, you could negotiate with the sales manager. Now you don't negotiate with him or her. You've got to talk to them, and then they have to talk to their director of sales or their director of revenue management. And the dorm, revenue management, a lot of times that person works for the accounting department. They don't work for sales. They work for accounting. So you have to make sure that that person approves the booking. So the way to do that from a planner standpoint is to make your group as attractive as possible. So you want hotels fighting for your group. Okay. So you want, say, Sunday arrivals are important for a hotel. If you could do a Sunday arrival, you're a rock star. Okay. If you make sure that the meeting space matches your room block, most hotels are built basically with 100 square feet of meeting space per group room. So if I have a 500 room hotel with 100 rooms of transient demand, 400 rooms of group demand, I need 400 rooms times 100 square feet. So I need 40,000 square feet of meeting space in that building, which is a fair amount of space. But if you're using more than 100 square feet from a hotel standpoint, that's not a great piece of business. Okay. So you have to be able to make sure you're limiting your space and maximizing the number of rooms. A couple of things also, concessions I always look for. It used to be the 1 per 40, for example, or 1 per 50.
Right.
At some point, 1 per 50 was a gospel. Now it's 1 per 40 or 1 per 35, any number of things. The trick is a lot of hotel companies now are saying the 1 per 40 applied on a day-by-day basis. So only on the days where you hit a certain number of rooms will you get that 1 per 40 comp. Hyatt and Hilton right now, for example, have that in their contracts. So be aware of that. The other thing to be aware of is that a lot of times they'll say that they're going to take the VIP upgrades, the suites that you're negotiating, and they're only using them for the main dates of the event, when typically your VIPs want to come in early and leave late. So you want to make sure your VIPs get the VIP treatment the entire length of stay. So you want to put in specifically what they're going to be staying in for exactly what dates. Make sure it's complimentary all the way through. That's very important. There's a couple things, the normal things. I always try to get complimentary in-room internet. The new one is complimentary in-meeting room internet. And a lot of times hotels years ago, they used to say that, no, it'll be $25 per person per day. That's a T1 line. And a T1 line was probably installed during the Reagan era. Okay. It's been there a while. It's paid off. They have made a ton of money on that, which is fine. But you know that if they've got that amount of profit involved, it is negotiable. So because it's negotiable, you should be able to get it comped or significantly discounted. You shouldn't be paying for wireless or Wi-Fi just so somebody can check their email at a coffee break.
And see, that's always something I put in my site inspection list too. I'm like, when was the last time your Wi-Fi infrastructure or your audio-visual infrastructure was updated? And how much room is there? Because if they haven't done it in at least 3 to 5 years, and that's light gauges inside that space now, like especially if you're running a technology show or have heavy users where they're carrying, because the average attendee is carrying 3 to 5 devices. If they just have their laptop, their phone, and a tablet times 200 to 2,000 people, that's a lot of drag on the bandwidth. And for an infrastructure that's 5 years old, and you may not be the only meeting in house, that's a lot of scary, especially if you're paying per head. So
and I've actually gone, when I've done a site inspection, I'll actually bring a tablet or a laptop and try to dial in just to see and do a speed check on that particular hotel, because I have a lot of high-tech, high-end clients that's the first thing they're going to check. So I want to make sure they're real happy.
Yeah, no. And like, how easy is it to log on? Because there's certain properties, like I will give Bonvoy and Marriott a shout out for this, because their access has gotten so much better even in the last 6 months. And this is no matter where you go because of all the acquisitions. I was in several different countries and several different parts of the world over the last 9 months, and we were staying in Marriott properties pretty consistently. And a lot of times it would be just 1 or 2 screens. Like they had my name and it didn't matter if I used the hyphen or not, and immediately recognized me, the room number, and then I was in. And
Cool.
there's still some brands that are struggling with that, where it's 6 to 7 screens plus a credit card, even though your credit card's on file down at the room. And like thinking about that from an attendee perspective, I mean, it's frustrating for me, and I work with event technology and technology quite a bit. I cannot imagine somebody who feels challenged by tech trying to just access the Wi-Fi to watch Netflix. You know, I'm like, just ridiculous. So let's talk a little bit about attrition, because I think one of the pieces that it comes up, and there's so much going around it, because when you've got this, the attrition clauses can be pretty intimidating in a hotel contract, right? So tell us what you see that's pretty standard for attrition clauses nowadays, and how much leeway do I actually have?
Sure. A lot of times hotels now are trying to get 90% actualization, 10% attrition allowance, that they're trying to go for 90 or 95% even in some cases. And I've actually come back and say, no, there's no way, because if it's going to be 95% on my group, then it should be 95% perfect on the hotel's half also. And that's not realistic on anyone. So there's always going to be tweaks and errors and things to be changed during the program. So what I typically will go in, I ask for 75 or 80%. I can typically get 80. Sometimes I got to go up to 85, but about 80% is a good thing to start off with. Okay, because what happens is also hotels, when they put 1,000 room nights on the books, they only pace it at 800. They only pace it at 80% because they know there's going to be some no-shows and some early departures, and they know net, they can count on 80% of that actually coming in the door. So be sure, don't ever guarantee exactly what you are contracting. I go for about 80% of that. Most importantly is make sure you have, and you see this on the tompasha.com, the rebook and the resell clause. There's two separate things, two separate items. Ask for both of them every time. The rebook clause means that if you do have to pay some attrition, that entire amount is applied to a future rebooking. Okay, and you always ask for the entire amount. Sometimes hotels say we'll do 75 or 50% or whatever. I try to get 100%, and I typically can get it. But I always ask for the rebook clause. The resale clause is different, is that if they're able to resell whatever you went into attrition, okay? If they're able to resell it and they hit the same revenue as they forecasted on their annual budget, there's no damage. There's no liability. You should not be paying any attrition. Okay, we can get into contracts right now if you like, but yeah, what happens is...
No, I mean, I was just thinking, you know, there was a Marriott property I was working with in DC. Big convention center, does a lot of group business.
Sure.
And we had been coming there pretty consistently over a few years, and we always booked Marriott. So our global sales rep would, okay, well, if we're going to do this Marriott, and this Marriott, one on the East Coast, one on the West Coast, and one Central, what would you think about signing a multi-year contract, right? So what does that look like? Is it like enterprise software sales, where if I sign a multi-year contract, will that help me from an attrition basis? Like if I have to cancel because maybe I've outgrown one of the Marriotts I was at, or...
Multi-year contracts used to be really good. They really don't do much for you anymore the way they used to, because right now, let's say for Marriott, they have Marriott owned and Marriott managed and franchises, and there's 3 separate P&Ls that go out to each type. So booking Marriott from coast to coast or Hyatt or Hilton from coast to coast doesn't give you that much sway. For any multi-year contract, though, I always like to make sure that they have that this contract is contingent on the successful completion of the current year. So if it's a 3-year contract, I don't want the center year to get overlooked with the idea that they still have a 3rd year. So each year of the contract is contingent on the year prior being a success. Yeah. And that's real important.
Yeah, and that's kind of scary too, because sometimes, you know, I mean, it can be a really good, like say you always do well in San Francisco, right? But Dallas or Chicago is a little bit more difficult because of your time of year. But it really adds that whole strategic meetings management mentality that you have to keep in mind.
Yeah, and if you know you have a stronger draw in one city than the other, be sure that you're adjusting your contract accordingly, number one. And then the other thing is that you mentioned the global sales offices for Marriott, Hyatt, Hilton, Sheraton, whoever it might be. They're great. If you're working with large groups, do be sure to work with them, because if you do get into an attrition issue at one hotel, a lot of times they can help you out. They can get with the director of sales at that hotel saying, look, she's already booked several years with us. Let's do a little, we just call it a catch and release. We caught her, and they're going to miss their number this year, but next year they're going to be back again. And like this year, I just finished a military reunion group this past week, and they doubled their pickup from the year before. And we know now, last year was off, this year they're huge. And it does happen, but our national sales office actually helped out getting a better deal for this week because of that.
So I know you're a third party, but you're a third party from like an independent planner perspective. There's some of them like Helms Briscoe, Conference Direct, HPN. You know, I've worked with all of them. They're really fantastic experience, but there's always some rumors going around. So what do you think about this, having sat on both kind of sides? Do you think working with a third party like that, sometimes they say, well, if you send in the RFP to such and such third party rep, they'll mark the room rights up, or you won't have as much flexibility versus working with a global salesperson?
Sure. Two parts is that I like working, obviously, as a third party. I'd say they're very good to try, but you got to make sure you get the right fit. Make sure you have a third party person who's worked in a hotel, that knows how a front desk or knows how to plate a banquet, or has ever worked in a real operation. Some of these third parties, and there's a ton of them out there, that they may have been real estate brokers, or they may have worked retail or something like that. That means nothing to the hotel business. If you have a hotel person who can actually talk to a hotel person and negotiate aggressively on your behalf, that's what you really want. Number one. The other thing is, typically when hotels will ask me, was that they may say that, Tom, if I work through you, they're going to increase my rate. I said, no, absolutely not. I will negotiate to make sure, and I negotiate against 2 and 3 different hotels, and I tell each hotel they're being shopped. And whichever one's going to get the best, gives me the best deal, is going to get the business. And then what I'll typically do is I'll take that deal and I'll shop it versus what the rate they've got online. Okay, I'll take a look on TripAdvisor and Kayak and all the other websites just to make sure I'm at or better than any offer they can get on their own.
Now, with your particular business, you work on a project or retainer basis, right? So they're paying for an overall package and services. But like with HPN and some of them, sorry, I'm calling HPN out just because I love them. They were ones I've used in the past. Like they worked on a third-party commission where if they booked out, they didn't get paid if they didn't get the deal from it. And most of the other ones, Helms Briscoe, Conference Direct, a lot of them work with the same model. But that's kind of changing a little bit with...
Pretty much all, including my company, you know, we're small here. We're a little different because we do corporate meetings, and some of our meetings involve a golf element. So we will book the group, and then we'll actually manage the golf event. So if it's a golf tournament or a fundraiser, we've done something like 30,000 rounds of golf per year. So when you do that amount of golf, you have to know your game, number one. But then we work on a commission basis also. If we have a group, if we have a group that wants us to go on site, manage the event, we can do marketing for the event. We can go on site and manage the event. I MC the golf awards banquets. So, you know, I'm the one to give out the awards for these things, because a lot of people, they don't want to get up on stage. Right. So that's, we have a full service. We get as involved as they want us to be. But I'd always caution, you know, when you're shopping for a third party, ask them, is there a preferred partner program? And I know Helms Briscoe is getting away from that now, but they used to say they'd have preferred partners where all the Hyatt hotels would buy a table at the banquet, and that became a membership privilege for Helms Briscoe people, sending them their business. Okay. Right. What you want is somebody who's working purely on commission, because if it's purely on commission, only on rooms, we have to get the piece of business or we don't get to eat. Okay. And so we have to be very aggressive. We have to close it. We have to fight on your behalf. If we're negotiating with a hotel that is paying to get business from, say, Helms Briscoe, you got to wonder whether it's a good fit.
Yeah. No, that's valid. So where do things like resort fees and service charges fit into from a negotiation standpoint? Because that's not really attrition. It's not really a commission based.
I negotiate them very aggressively. And again, I don't know how many people are on this call. If anybody who's on the call has actually been in a hotel, But the way it works is a hotel, we live and die by the P&L, the profit and loss statement. And P&L, if you got the rooms department, you have room sales, you subtract rooms cost, you have rooms profit. Same with food and beverage sales, food and beverage, take out the expenses, then you have food and beverage profit. But for public room rental, it's 100% profit. If you have $25,000 in a month of public room rental, there's no assigned expense. So you get to put $25,000 on your bottom line. Same with resort fees. Resort fees are the exact same thing. And actually, even the service charge for banquets, when they're saying 19 or 20 or 24% service charge, do you tip 24%? No, no one tips 24% at a restaurant unless you're getting exceptional service. And the idea of doing automatically 24% to have somebody drop a plate in front of you is pretty silly. But that goes right to the bottom line. So again, if it's 100,000 at the top line, it's 100,000 on the bottom line. I negotiate that very aggressively. The reasons for that is that once you have the cover price for a banquet plus the 24%, if I can get that, they get 24% and then the sales tax on top of that. So it could be 32 to 33%. So it gets into some big numbers really quickly. So my trick is I always try to get one hotel to go to 22. If I get one to go 22, I can maybe get one to go to 20. I had one last week at 19.5. So it can be done. And I just booked that a year ago for this past week. So it can be done if it's important to the people on this call as meeting planners. If you want to save some money, just bear in mind, you've got basically free money. So because of that, it is negotiable. Okay?
Yeah. So that's actually something, there was the resort fees have been in the news lately. I was reading on Skift a couple of days ago that it's Marriott and Hilton are being sued over resort fees, right?
Yes.
And
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, what do you think of all of that? Do you think
I think resort fees are actually, I think they're borderline legal, actually, because if you're advertising a room rate, that should be the rate you're paying. Okay. Right. And again, if there's resort fee, the reason they have a resort fee at all is that they can promote their room rate, but you don't see the resort fee if you're online, unless you go 3 and 4 pages deep into the reservation. A lot of times it's not even in there. And it never says, what does it cover? And when in fact, it doesn't cover anything. It's just a way of a hotel generating revenue without having an assigned expense. So if you have a $200 room rate with a $20 resort fee, they just increase your rate 10% without having to admit it. And so I always challenge that one. And either I'll have them put it into the room rate. I don't like it. Some like Hilton Hotels says, we'll make it optional. I don't like that either, because if I've got a teachers group, for example, I work with a lot of teachers groups. Some teachers have got a better travel budget than others. And I don't want somebody to not get Wi-Fi when this person can get Wi-Fi. Okay, I want everybody to be equal because they're all there for my event. So I always negotiate it into the room rate.
Do it in Europe, because Europe makes you, the way they have to publish online, they have to publish everything. It's an all-inclusive rate. It can't have any of the exclusive of tax and resort fees and whatever else. Do you think that's the trend of where we're going to be going in the States?
I think it's getting there. The resorts are starting to do that. I do a lot of incentive trips also, where they say it's the room rate plus resort fee plus ground transportation, the all-inclusive package. There's only a handful of all-inclusives in the continental U.S. now, but a lot of hotels are starting to experiment with it. They've been making it millions of dollars for years all through the Caribbean and Mexico with all-inclusives, and I think that is going to get more and more popular. Right now, we call it the CMP, the Complete Meeting Package, where it includes breakfast, lunch, dinner, breaks, meeting space, basic audiovisual on a per-person basis. I think that is something that I think is a good idea.
So let's talk a little bit about incentives business, because it's always fascinating to me. You can spend $6,000 per head, but you've only booked 25 room nights. And depending on the 25 nights per room, right, on peak. And so you're like, how do you... To me, I would think that I should have more negotiating power. And with some of the properties we work with, we do, because of the exclusivity of the property, the location, some of the different pieces. But there are some of them, especially those that are looking more towards these, all-in-one inclusive things, but they're still using a large group meeting mentality. So
Sure.
what advice would you give to someone who is a first timer or maybe not as used to booking incentive or small group business that has a high price tag attached to it?
Sure. Well, if you're just getting into the incentive, it's most important to speak with, a lot of times, the vice president of marketing or vice president of sales for your client company. And you want to find out, what is their expectation? Is it going to be a big arrival, reception, dinner, theme party? Number one. Is there going to be a golf tournament? Is there going to be a spa event for all the spouses? Is there a casino on property? Because if you can find out all the different ways that hotel can drive revenue, I've worked in a number of golf resorts coming up. And if we had a group that has a lot of golf, a lot of spa, and played in our casino, we would cut them significant deals, because the hotel, in sleeping rooms, we keep about 75 to 80 cents on the dollar. Okay, I got 80% profit in the guest room. I get 90% profit in the spa, golf, and casino. If you can get in there, if you're bringing that kind of revenue, that's why hotels, the planners on this call should realize you have the cookie. You are negotiating, you are bringing us, the hotel guys, business. And given a choice, I'd much rather have an incentive group there, guys on the golf course, people in the spa, everybody's in the casino at night, buying banquet revenue. Banquet revenue is 40% profit. Food and beverage in the outlets, I lose money on that. I don't get to keep any of that money. So if I'm bringing a great incentive group in there that's in the catering and in all the outlets and the amenities, I'm going to be able to make a lot more money. But the most important thing is realize, again, the people on the call, realize how important you are to big hotels. We need groups. So if you can pick, if you can kind of be flexible with your dates and let us find a date where we can put you in, we will do everything we can to get you in there.
So let's just pause for a quick second on that. I want to go back because we had a couple of questions come in from the audience. Okay. So thinking about the Wi-Fi, when you had said on your site inspection that you do speed checks, what kind of tools are you using to do the speed check?
Just what's the name of it? I think it's just called speed check. Just go online and dial in. Yeah, I believe it's just called speed check. I don't have it in front of me, but it is. You can just check it. You can, tell you how many bytes are being broadcast through the Wi-Fi in-house.
Yeah, we'll have to have one of the Brent or the Will and have you check on it later, because that should go in the resources. All right, coming back to incentive business then. So there was another question that just came in specifically around incentives, and I think this is interesting because generationally, like the spa, speaking for the ladies and for some of the dudes, the spa is always fun, right? It's always, I think, going to be an attraction. But golf, maybe it is, but with a certain group, it's fun. It's not as fun as, like, say, axe throwing. But most resorts aren't adding axe, But we were at Connect Marketplace, and they had the break the plate, like the rage rooms. I think there are some, especially outside of the continental U.S., who just do a better job of offering different types of services that aren't golf. The Broadmoor is one of the singular examples, and then of several properties, of course, thinking in California, like Hudson Valley. But, what other services that aren't spa or golf do you see being popular with the resorts? And how much negotiation is it if something like that doesn't exist on the property, so that you still have the cookie, so to speak?
Sure. A lot of times for the extracurriculars, I do a lot of groups, they'll go out deep sea fishing. I put a group out in the Keys, and they'll go out deep sea fishing. And it's interesting, most hotels have a relationship in that destination, will have a relationship with a deep sea fishing captain. And what they do is they do get a commission on that referral. And they do have a DMC. So if you're going through the in-house DMC and the in-house fishing company, whatever activity you want, like I said, get with your vice president of sales, vice president of marketing. Typically, it could be an insurance company, for example. They take their top producers, say, okay, we're going to take everybody offshore for a sunset cruise, and we're going to take them to axe throwing, or we're going to take them to play golf. Or a lot of times what I do for the golf is that they may have a scramble, and a scramble is where everybody hits the ball, and whoever gets to the best place and everybody brings their ball up. It's a lot of fun. And even if you're not a golfer, you can have some fun with it. Okay. Right. Serious golfers don't like doing that. So what we'll typically do is we'll do both, and we'll play with it a little bit. We could actually do little extra attractions on the golf course. We can do a lesson. I have a trick shot artist. I have a guy that he can hit a ball 450 yards. He can hit a ball standing on top of a basketball. He can do, I mean, that's what he does. And so we can play with it quite a bit. So don't be, the main thing is just let us know, let the hotel guy know what you have in mind. Because
so
again,
back to that RFP and really thinking about the bulleted list beforehand so they can prepare it for your site visit so you can really see if this is a negotiated value for you or not.
Oh, sure. And if any kind of activity, again, like the axe throwing or whatever it is, I can find a DMC or I can bring an axe throwing person in. Actually, I have a magician. And the guy, I booked him all over the country. He's great. He's nationally recognized magician. And what I can do is that when I book him, I know what his fee is, and I know that we'll do a little something back to the hotel because we're actually spending money at the hotel.
Yeah.
So.
All right. So let's talk a little bit. We talked about incentives. So think about government groups. This is always a question that comes up when you do webinars with me because I feel like it's a constant struggle for the government rates. They have so much money from a per diem and from that. So how do you help negotiate the government rates so that the event planner is able to really work within their confines, but the hotel isn't going to just shift them off into the back room somewhere?
Sure. I always, again, if I know that I'm going to have some government attendees, I will put that on the bullet points on my RFP, that I know I need 15 or 20 or 50 rooms per night at the government per diem. And what happens is, from a hotel standpoint, typically I will take that because refusing to take government business can actually get you in some trouble. There is that discussion, and that has come up where if you don't take the federal government rated rooms, are you discriminating against the federal government? Because you don't get there is a whole discussion there.
Aside from the really, really bad PR that would come.
No, you don't want to do it. So from a hotel standpoint, we'll say, okay, we'll give you 10 or 12 or 15 rooms per night, but we will ask the planner to send us a rooming list. We don't want people calling in to book their own government rated rooms because we don't know if they're for real or if they're a friend of a government guy or they happen to wear a government hat or something. We don't know for a fact, and we can't really put that kind of decision in the hands of a front desk clerk. We would want the client to say, okay, here are our government attendees, arrival date, departure date, here's your American Express card. And if they can do that.
That they're government employees. You'd mentioned a TDY card?
Yeah, typically what we'll do at the front desk, if they say that I'm Tom Pasha here on the government rate, they'll say, fine, do you have your TDY card, which is basically a tour of duty card is what they call it. And you can actually come in and say, yes, you are traveling for government business. Okay. And typically they'll ask for that or a business card, and they'll put the business card in with the guest folio. So if there were to be an audit, the most important thing from a hotel standpoint is that we're giving it to the people who deserve it, because we don't want to get sideways with the government either.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, let's talk a little bit about contracts and negotiation around like acts of God, force majeure, and then everybody's unfavorite but super popular subject, event safety. So how do I mitigate in my hotel contract an active shooter? How do I mitigate a hurricane? Are there clauses that I can put in to protect myself in the meeting?
Sure. Pretty much what you'll see, I think most every hotel company, Hyatt, Hilton, Sheraton, Marriott, they have a library of clauses. And I actually have the workbook for one company here of their entire library of clauses. And what they actually do is they say, this is what we want to go with. And then if the client says they like that, that's fine. If they want to change it or edit it, then here's your fallback. All hotels have the initial offer, the fallback offer, and the lose it deal. Okay, they're not going to lose a piece of business based on the initial offer. Okay, so bear that in mind, number one. What's approved in the contract library, just make sure that it matches what you want. I like making sure it has severe weather is listed in there. Okay, and the idea is at one point the contracts, what's called the force majeure clause, or Marriott calls it the impossibility clause. They have, each one has its own little way of looking at it. At one point, it had it all spelled out that 2/3 of the attendees would have to be impacted from this hurricane or something, which it turned out that got kicked out of court. Basically, the law now says if a reasonable person could look at it and say that there was a hurricane in Florida, and even though it was in Miami, this meeting in Jacksonville was impacted. So because of that, could a reasonable person say this should be a force majeure cause?
Right.
And if that's the case, the most important thing is it's a reasonable person. So don't get hung up with percentages of percentages. Most important thing is make sure it's got, the God or government, it's got severe weather, it's got, the open shooter. There's not a whole lot you can do about that, other than you just got to make sure that that's the sort of thing that's you're taking care of it at that moment. You really can't have that in guard against that in a contract.
It was something we were talking to a hotel contract inspector, someone, they weren't legal, but they were legal assistant. And it was someone who was discussing the impact on the riots, peaceful though they may have been, and have been going back and forth in Hong Kong. And it seems,
Sure.
there are several businesses who had booked meetings there, and now it's not that they're seeing an overall disruption, but it's like this constant hum in the background. And
Sure.
there are several American groups that are talking about bringing action with it. And so if it originates in one place, can you use that clause? Like if I'm booking with a Marriott in Hong Kong, is it going to be a similar clause, or should I go, is it country rule? Like whose rule of law governs that, mine or theirs?
Typically, wherever the hotel is, that would be their rule of law. Okay. What I would do is, there's a lot of cities. I get cities all the time where people are afraid to go to, say, Baltimore. People are afraid to go to Detroit. People are afraid to go to for whatever reason. They've heard there's violence there. There's more shootings on a slow weekend in Chicago than there are in Tehran. And that's the thing is that, but the idea is that from a hotel standpoint, we say, look, you are not going to be, if you're at 3:00 in the morning with a hello, my name is name tag, and you've had too many drinks and you're walking in a bad part of town, you don't belong here. Okay.
Yeah.
You have
No,
to kind of use some common sense. We do ask you to use common sense here. It's like any city. Any city is going to have great, wonderful, amazing, attractive things about it. And there's got to be some things you got to look out for. Okay.
Yeah.
So you just got to encourage your attendees not to be stupid, number one. Because the hotel, when I was selling different cities, I was in Washington, D.C. It was a tough sell. It was in a tough part of the economy then. And, getting people to come to D.C. took a lot of sales. Took a lot of work.
So talking about things that you can't always control, room pirates. That's one that I feel like, God, even like it's just an ongoing thing that has only escalated. And there's only so much you can do. So
Sure.
from a contract protection and kind of negotiating, how do you deal with room pirates? Is that something I should put into my contract and say, if this, then that, or something?
I would say make sure nobody is solicited by anybody to book a room, because pirates will Google whatever, pediatric nurses, and they will get a flat list of every pediatric nurse in the Western states. And they will email, voicemail, and somehow solicit them to come in when they come to the pediatric nurse convention to contact them directly, not the hotel or the Hotel 800 number. And they'll say they're getting some kind of very good rate, or you get double points or free parking or something like that. Don't fall for it. Because number one, they are pirate. Number one, if the group doesn't pick up their rooms, you could end up being, the hotel ends, or the group can end up paying meeting room rental. There could be attrition. There could be registration issues. There's all sorts of things by not picking up the rooms. A couple of things. I always like putting in the warning when I do an email. I just did one this past week. We put out the word saying, do not take any calls from anyone soliciting room business, because these are not authorized and we will not get credit for the pickup. The rates are comparable or competitive to anything you're going to see in town, number one. Yeah. Number two is a lot of times the websites, if you're doing a passkey link, they are password protected. So make sure you have the password out there, and only reservations are getting through with that password. It's only individual reservations, not from Fred Jones and Associates making 50 room reservations.
Right.
Okay?
So so let's say we've signed the contract, right? We have the clause, we put the information out about the room pirates. How do I make sure once I'm on site, because every day I'm checking who's arrived, who's departed, who's been pirated. So how do I really make sure that what we agreed to is what's actually happening?
Sure. Well, two things. Actually, I always try both ways. Actually, Hilton and Hyatt both do it this way. They have what they call the GRIP program. And it's the group rooms insurance program, something like this. And what they do is you can take your attendee list and just do a Excel spreadsheet, last name, first name, arrival date, departure date, and run that, and they will compare that to their group room reservation list. And they'll check to make sure everybody you've got on your list is there in their in-house. And even if they did not go through your room category, if they called directly, if they had their mother send them a letter, however they did it, however they made that reservation, you should get pickup for that group. I don't care if they got there for points. If they're there for free points, for meeting planner points or Hilton Honors points, whatever it is, if they're there in that building, they are there because you booked the meeting. So you should get pickup credit for that room. That's very important, and everyone on the call should say that this is, you ask for the audit clause. All hotel companies have something called an audit clause or something similar. Like I said, Hilton calls it the GRIP clause. But be sure to ask for that so that any name that they show that went around the block and for any reason, you still get pickup credit for it. Okay. Yeah. Number one, if you have a whole number of people that you have as attendees that don't have rooms, the hotel can also check that, saying no rooms. We have 100 attendees. You should get with those attendees and find out where they are. Yeah. Because maybe they're down the street and maybe you put through, actually I have one group that we did an overflow block. We blocked in 10, they picked up 50. Okay. And with the 50 rooms per night they picked up, I was able to get additional comps for my client.
Nice.
Okay. And I didn't even negotiate. I negotiated it in at 1 per 40 or whatever it was. We didn't think they're going to pick up any, but they ended up picking up, I want to say 15, 60 rooms for 4 nights. So it was a great piece of additional comp credit towards my client.
Yeah. So thinking about
check both ways.
So thinking about all of the meetings that you've seen negotiated, right? So from your days back in the hotels and like the ones that you work with now, what is the best, like the most outrageous but most fantastic contract you've ever seen make it through from an approvals? Like someone who had just huge asks.
Let's see. I had clients ask for 1 per 25. I have comp food and beverage. I think actually one of my biggest ask was the Michael Jackson Victory Tour. And this is in the early 80s. And he wanted 2 floors just for his rooms and for us to run the floor below that empty at no rate. Okay, just for security. And we're supposed to get a commission on any food and beverage sold to the fans that were going to be in the lobby. And it was an amazing amount of stuff. We did, the new kids on the block. Each of the 5 kids brought their own bus, so I had to find bus parking for 5 separate buses, and each kid brought their own little mini entourage. So you had to come up with that. And we actually, with Michael Jackson, it was interesting. His advanced guy, he wanted to come in and say, for his suite. I said, now what it's called a rider, R-I-D-E-R, whatever is going to be requested. I said, I thought he's going to want a llama and a monkey and whatever was going on at that point. And it was actually interesting. He asked for 4 pieces of dance floor to be set up, a floor-length mirror, and 2 cases of Evian water. I said, that's actually
one of the better riders I've ever heard of. Yeah.
That's very nice. We can easily do that. Yes. And then the other guys came in the following tour, and that's when they wanted me to give a commission on all the rooms and all the food and beverage. I said, that's not going to happen.
Did you clear the room below? Did it get through?
No, it did not go through.
I was going to say, there's no RevPAR manager out there alive.
No, it would not go through. That I wouldn't do that anyway. Yeah. And then actually I did one for Pampered Chef years ago. We had 8,000 Pampered Chef attendees. We had an hour and 10 minutes to feed them. And to do this breakfast, lunch, dinner buffets for 8,000 people. So it takes 40 double-sided buffets. And we had to have 50 guys primarily running from the kitchen just to make sure we had enough staff that if somebody ran out of blueberry muffins, that we weren't going to stop the line. We were not going to run out.
Put the buffet in? Was it all in like one great big ballroom?
It was 250,000 square feet of dining. And what we did to do this, we only had seating for 6,000. So what we do is we seat each row one at a time by lining up our servers. And then when that one row was filled, then we'd move the servers, fill the next row, all the way across a 250,000 square foot hall. By the time the last row was served, the first row was done. So we would turn that first row and we rebooted the entire ballroom. It took a little doing.
Thinking about like from a logistics standpoint.
Yeah, they just finished their program in Rosemont, Illinois, and they're still doing it that way.
Are they really?
Yeah, because again, the physical, you only have that size meeting room to work with, but they're still doing it that way.
I just where inside the hotel side do you go and you say, "Dear meeting planner, I think you're fantastic, but no freaking way can we accommodate that."
Oh yeah, no, there's been a couple. Actually, there was one. It was a clothing optional convention, and that's what we do, okay? But yeah, it was a clothing optional convention. You come into the pre-function area, and then we had a pipe and drape section, and then another open area, then another pipe and drape area. So once you passed that second pipe and drape area, it was clothing optional. And we had to make sure our employees, who would remain clothed, were okay working with a bunch of naked folk. And again, if the employees are ready to do it, and it was filling a time when we had to fill the dates, that's what we do.
What city was that in? I remember one time I booked a meeting in Austin, and we had what was called the Extra Action Marching Band that we flown in from San Francisco.
Sure.
And the morning show was a marching band in traditional marching attire, and the evening show was a topless marching band that happened.
Okay.
And so we had to put, because inside it was the Austin Convention Center in the Hilton that we were working with. Sure. And bless their hearts, I think we shaved off 10 years from their poor attorney's life, because they had a morality clause inside one of the contracts, and we had to go back and negotiate it. And we, at one point, the Extra Action Marching Band actually said, it's okay, we'll put nipple covers on, so that, because that's really from strip law in Texas, as long as the nipple is covered, you're considered clothed, and it's not full frontal, right? Okay. And so we had to explain to the hotel attorney what that was. And then when the explanation on the phone didn't work, the poor director of sales at the Hilton had to provide a photo. And so, it triggered all of this. And so now I'm always with fuzzies contracts, like the ones where they scratch up against each other when they're dressed up.
Sure, the furries. Yeah.
It's those interesting clauses that you never even think about, but you're not wrong. This is what we do. Sometimes there are people, and that needs to go into the contract too, because it's just part of the business.
Oh yeah, I always try to make sure, and again, depending, like a Pampered Chef, for example, whenever I worked on their programs, I'd also check to see what else was in town. And you want to make sure that it's not something that they'd have a problem with, okay? And it's whatever it is, it can't be the alternative lifestyle weekend with Pampered Chef. It's not good. So you want to make sure, let them have their weekend. And then for my weekend, I want to make sure, again, I always worry about the Murphy's Law client. It's going to be the one client's going to have the biggest problem, and he or she's going to be in my office, and there's going to be a problem. So I try to avoid this from the outset.
I think you bring an important point there too, and Rutger brought this up too, thinking about typical destinations, is this hotel really going to be the right fit culturally? Is this city going to be the right fit culturally? There are some groups that you just can't bring to Vegas. It's just not going to work. And there are some groups that you can't bring to Des Moines, Iowa. And they have lovely properties, they have lovely options, but it's just not going to float. And working with a third party or an experienced meeting planner, if that's not your sweet spot, I think that's a very valuable asset to have in your toolkit, because especially if you've been on the hotel side, where all the crazy hides in the back of house. Can have those conversations.
Yeah, I always try to say when I have a new client or client who's just getting started, I'm starting with a new client at an established account, or I've just got a new client I just started working with a new group, I'll ask, where have you been before? Because for some reason, everybody want to go to South Beach, and South Beach is not for everybody.
No, it's
New
not.
Orleans is not for everybody. There's certain, you want to make sure you have the right, I say you got to make sure the top fits the pot, because if it's not, even if the food's great and everything else is great, all you're going to hear about was that we love the hotel, but the city was awful. And
Yeah.
even if the city was South Beach or the city was New Orleans, it's not for everybody. So I always try to make sure I have an idea of where they've been, an idea of what their comfort level is for the future.
Yeah. All right. So we've got about 7 minutes left. What's the one thing we should have asked you about hotel sourcing, negotiation, contracts, room management that we didn't talk about?
Let's see. Just make sure, again, start off with the RFP. Be very specific. Tell me exactly what you want, because what happens is now the sales manager doesn't just sell directly to you. I've got to sell to my boss and the director of revenue management. So be aware. Be aware that you know how important the group is to that hotel, because we want your business in my hotel no matter what. If I get the dates, I want to sell them to you right now. Okay, so make sure you're very specific. Number one. And then when you go for what I typically do is I'll take the RFP, we'll negotiate 20 different points. Once I get 20 of them all on the list and 19 of them we agree on, typically we'll get that 20th just because they want to get it booked. Okay,
Yeah.
we'll go through all 20 and maybe one is a little bit of hesitancy, but we'll get that booked anyway. Okay, then I'll take that final approved list and I want to cut and paste it right onto the contract. Because what I want to do is take the RFP versus a signed contract and check one against the other just to make sure it all matches. I don't want to go through some 20-page contract Hyatt Hotels epic to find my bullet points. I want them all spelled out, especially in my case, I'm the third party. I want to be able to explain it to my client. So, okay, we negotiated this right down, all the way down the road. Okay, and just make sure it's very specific. Okay, and nothing TBD. Some hotels now want to get back to a current rate plus a 3 to 4% increase per year, and they're asking to do that. Years ago, we used to do that back in like the early 80s when inflation was all over the park. Now it should be a guaranteed rate. So you want to make sure everything, there's no TBDs. I want to make sure in the program is to make sure the name of the room or the square footage is guaranteed.
Yeah.
So there's a whole series of things just to make sure that it's all very specific. Most important thing is in all likelihood that sales manager is going to get hired or fired or hired away or promoted or fall in love or out of love or anything. And so once you book it, in all likelihood, the sales manager is going to be gone when the group comes in. So you want to make sure that it's very specific so you can walk the new sales manager through it and it's a successful event.
You brought up something that made me think about from the specificity, construction. Earlier, before we started, we were talking about how Orlando is, they're increasing their square footage yet again. Many hotels, they're adding on, they're doing renovations. It's just a way of life that no matter what venue you're in, there's constant improvements, which is good for us because it's improving the overall experience of the space we're in. But if you happened to be that person who is inside the hotel whose back is now completely missing because construction is running behind, making sure that there's a clause of some kind or a notation in it that says, if this happens, then y'all will be okay with us going somewhere else. That's a default in my contracts.
Yeah, and you should just ask for that. That's one of those standard clauses that every hotel chain has in their approved library of clauses. And sometimes it says that we will do everything we can to remedy the situation. If the remedy is not mutually agreed upon as being satisfactory, then the client has the option of changing dates or canceling the event. And if that's the case, you want something like that. Because, if it's an emergency repair, that's one thing. But if it's a planned renovation, that's a problem. I had an incentive trip actually in Napa Valley at a big deal resort out there, and they started tearing up the lobby on my arrival day.
Oh, no.
And we had to have them, I had to get with the general manager. I said, either we stop until my group checks out, or then your next call would be my attorneys. And you don't want to deal with them. Because again, they would have been, we paid for this very high-end, world-class resort that was going to be a construction zone for the next 2 months. So they were able to accommodate. It's just I didn't want my client was very upset. We got her settled down and everything worked out. But it was one of those things, just make sure that is in the contract.
Yeah. And I think that's the other thing too. You've mentioned it several times throughout our conversation today, but the level of, it's not aggressiveness, but direct, flat. This is what has to happen. You know, there's a give and a take inside negotiation, but there's like there's a line. And if you don't feel comfortable doing that, find yourself an ally who is okay with saying no. And if this doesn't happen, my attorneys will be the next call. Or if this doesn't happen, here's the escalation points. Because you did sign a contract and you did negotiate these points. And by God, you should get what you pay for, because your job as the event planner is at risk if you don't.
Sure. Yeah. And it's one of those things, a lot of people use me in particular or use other third parties. Yeah. It's okay to have a bad cop. Yeah. The client can be the good cop. If you need somebody to sing backup or to be the wingman on this one, that's good. You know, we'd be happy to do that, because if you're happy, that's your comfort level, we want you to concentrate on your attendees and your content, and we'll take care of the logistics. And sometimes you have to be a little aggressive to make that happen.
Yeah. All right. So we're at time. So people can find you at tompasha.com or Connect Planning.
No, go to actually tpasha@contactplan.com, and Contact Planning is the name of my company, but tpasha@contactplan.com. Or if you want to look at the website, is the tompasha.com, and that's got some information, got some published stuff in some meeting planning and golf magazines. It's got interesting downloads. It has a fun page. We're redoing it now, but it has some other stuff. It's got some really good stuff in it. I teach a class called the Meeting Planning Mastermind, where I teach meeting planners how hotels work. A lot of material from that class is on that website. So take a look at that, and you see my phone number will be there also. So go ahead and give me a call.
Okay, so we've got that. And then last question, any resources outside of your website, which is chock full of good stuff, that you're taking advantage of? I know you mentioned the speed check for the Wi-Fi. What else? Books, articles, apps that you love? Anything you want to leave us with?
Let's see. Surprisingly, actually, there's all the usual industry stuff, but I was trying to think of some surprising stuff. I like looking at the Farmer's Almanac. Okay, you can go to almanac.com, because the convention bureaus always say it's going to be 70 and sunny in Baltimore every March. Okay, it's not. But the Farmer's Almanac, you can actually look that up, this day in weather history. And you could look that up. You can look up the day by zip code. And so you can see what is downtown Chicago in February, whatever part of the country, because a lot of times you want to do some outdoor activities or a tour. I just finished a group up in Calgary, and I've not been to Calgary in 15 years, I bet. But I wanted to make sure that I had my ducks in a row. But it's one of those things, everyone has the normal apps and all the MPI downloads and that sort of thing. But that, surprisingly, I don't want to see what the CVB is going to tell me. I'd rather look at the almanac, where it actually tells me what happened on that day. And you could go every year for the last 20 years.
I love it. I love it.
Pretty handy.
Right. Well, Tom, this has been great. Again, just so much that we learned. Every time we talk, I learn something new. So make sure you check him out online. He does presentations for Connect. Outside of that, other episodes you can check us out on for hotel contract negotiation, Rutger Horn, Tyra Hillard. We just have a lot of them. This one will pair nicely with Tracy Stuckrath's last week. And if you aren't able to join us live, make sure you're downloading us online at your favorite podcast, Spotify, Apple. We're on all the podcast channels, event icons. And if we're not on your favorite podcast, let us know. Every Wednesday, 5 p.m. Eastern Time. Check us out, event-icons.com. We'll be back next week to talk about what's happening with events and event icons, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you for joining us for another amazing episode of #Event Icons.
To catch all the bonus content, resources mentioned, and an invite to our Facebook and LinkedIn groups,
head to www.event-icons.com. Also, let us know what you thought about this week's episode. Share your biggest takeaway. Just tag your post with #Event Icons. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you again for joining us. We'll see you next Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern, right here on #Event Icons.